Morning, Cynthia, right?
Yes.
Yes. So I want to let you know my name is Dr. Kim Bundy Fazioli, but please feel free to call me Kim. And first of all, it's really nice to meet you. I know we talked on the phone. And our protocol at the Bereavement Center is my role is I initially meet with people just to get an understanding of what your needs are and what you would like from our counseling services. And then after our meeting, um, I will talk with one of the social work counselors to figure out who would be the best kind of person to connect with you. Do you have any questions about that?
I don't. Thanks.
Great. Well, wonderful. So why don't we get started? You shared a little bit on the phone, but from the last time we talked, maybe you can give me an idea of, what is it that you would like at this time?
I guess I am struggling with balancing the loss with my life is the
Mm,
biggest struggle that I'm having. Um, I know that we haven't gone into it yet, but my son died. And when
okay.
he first died, I was able to feel his presence around me a lot, and I didn't struggle as much with depression or sadness. And it's been some time, and I feel like I'm struggling more with where the world in sadness and depression lies and where the world of my life lies.
Mm. Would you be willing to share a little bit more information about your son? How old was he and what happened? And
Sure, sure. My
yeah, whenever I ask questions, if you don't want to go there right now, I respect that. So,
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. I'll let you know if that happens. Um, well, first, my son's name was Matthew. He was 37, married. He had two children. His children at the time were ages 4 and 6. And he got hit on his bicycle from behind. He owned a tour company in Nevada, and he gave mountain bike tours and road bike tours. And he got hit from behind early one morning when he was leading a
mm,
group, and he bounced off the windshield. And when he did, they believe his helmet slipped right up over his head from the force of the impact. So he took the brunt of the impact on his head. He was still alive, but they took him to a trauma unit, and he stayed there for approximately 7 days. He was hit on the 3rd of August, and he was pronounced dead on the 9th of August.
I'm so
My,
sorry.
my daughter, who was home, kept asking me over and over again if the doctors had said his pupils were dilated and unresponsive. And after a while, my older son, who lived next to him, said yes, they were. And my daughter started crying. And since she is in the healthcare field, that kind of gave me an indication that he had died, even though he was still breathing.
Mhm. Oh, so sorry. So this happened very suddenly.
Very suddenly, healthy, resting heart rate 40. He rode hundreds of miles a week, given tours.
Mm,
Great dad, was the one who actually took care of the kids, picked them up, nurtured, tucked them into bed, that kind of thing.
mhm,
So initially, I didn't know what to do with myself. Like I live on the East Coast and he lived on the West Coast.
mhm,
So my older son, who lived in close proximity to Matthew, called me, and for a few hours we had to get tickets, we had to fly out there, we were out there by midnight.
mhm.
For a few hours I just didn't even know what to do with myself. I was just,
Sure.
what do
And
you do, what do you say, there's nothing you can say, there's nothing you can do.
mhm,
I think I had a different response than at least most of the people around me did. Um, I have been in recovery before, and one of the skill sets is to turn it over to God. And I really believe that life is out of my hands.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a lot of turning it over and saying to God, I'm not going to be okay with him leaving, but you're going to do whatever your will is. And so that kind of helped, I think, on the way. I had a strange reaction. Like, I was very thankful, I think it was, that the people that came to visit him in the trauma center were his biking buddies, bicycle friends. And I got to share, they shared with me Matthew's stories. They shared with me. And at the time, I was proud of the person I knew. I was proud of the person Matthew was, and not that he was gone. So that was something that sustained me pretty well during the really traumatic period. I also had a different reaction than everyone else did. He was an organ donor, and he donated to 5 people.
Wow.
And he couldn't be an organ donor for his heart until he was declared brain dead, and that didn't happen for a few days. And they took him off the ventilator, and they realized he was brain dead, and they put him back on the ventilator. And I wanted to cheer because they declared him brain dead, because I felt like his heart was so useful that I wanted it to be a part of what he did. So that was then. That was
How long ago was this?
That was a little over 3 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. But since that time, I was sustained a lot by his presence. I really feel that he resides in my heart. But getting back to like a normal, quote unquote, way of life, and not having the opportunity to talk about it as much as when it was fresh, because it feels like people are less. I feel like I'm pardon the expression, beating a dead horse. Like, people after a while don't want to hear how painful it is.
Sure. Can I ask, and I want to come back to that point, but leading up to this, can you give me an idea of what you found helpful and and also what you didn't find helpful in terms of the support you received?
Sure. I was surprised, actually, to find out that there are no bereavement groups that meet for parents weekly. I was shocked.
In your area?
In my area. It took me a long time. I was desperate to talk with other parents who had lost children. So I started Google searching for counseling options, support groups. I don't have a lot of money, and there's limited amounts of, I feel like, services when you don't have a lot of money.
Yeah, sure.
And so I started going, because even if back then, they've changed it since then, even if you hadn't had someone in hospice offers bereavement counseling once a week in our different areas. So I started going that, and then I found out online about a group called Compassionate Friends. That meets once a month, and it's all parents of children who have died. And the 2 groups that I alternate between, so that I can meet twice a month with a group of people.
Good for you.
Most of those parents are parents of adult children.
And this is online where you meet?
Nope, this is physically.
Gotcha.
Physically, that one's held in my area. I live on the border of 2 different counties. So I go to one in one county and one in the other county. so that it works out to be like every other week.
Mm-hmm.
I get a chance to go to a group.
So when Matthew died, and over this 3-year time period, you know, how, well, let me go back to what you said before, because maybe that's where we can start, is that now you feel that people really, they're ready for it to be over. Or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that's
Yes.
what I heard you saying.
And I forgot to say what didn't work.
Oh,
too.
okay. Yeah,
I'm sorry,
sure.
I forgot about
That's
that.
okay.
Half of the question. The part that didn't work for me was people, like, for example, my own brother did it. There was something I was struggling with that was a family land type thing that was taking place. And Matthew always wanted to be part of that. And I was struggling with just the letting go of Matthew not being part of that family
Decision.
arrangement.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother said, well, is what it is. Life goes on. That was very hard to take.
Sure.
Those types of remarks are the ones that stuck out the most for me.
So kind of it is what it is, let's move on.
Right. And the other piece that I learned is that my family didn't know how to cope with me with it. They hurt my feelings a lot in the beginning. But I also learned that if I wanted it to be different, I could either be mad at them and write them out of my life, or I could ask for what I needed, because I have been in counseling before.
Sure.
And be okay with if they gave me what I wanted or didn't give me what I wanted. But I had to teach them how to support me.
How did you do that, if you don't mind my asking?
I would just ask for what I wanted. So, for example, one year, I think it was the first year, it was Matthew's birthday. And I wanted to do something special. So I said, I'm going to have a medium come to the house. You're invited. No, it was his second year. It was his second birthday after he died. I'm going to have a medium come to the house. If you want to join me, that's great. If you don't, that's okay too. And after that, I'm going to take Matthew's ashes to this outdoor pub, bring him with me. I'm going to sing happy birthday to him, and we're going to have a drink celebrating his life. Now, some of my siblings, my one brother and his wife, was comfortable coming to the medium. My two sisters were not. And my one girlfriend came to the medium as well. So I found that if I needed it to be different, I needed to be the one to ask for what I felt like I needed.
That took a lot of strength. I mean, a lot of awareness and strength.
It was either that or be mad and shut everybody off from my life.
Sure.
And that wasn't really, not really a good answer either. So I took a chance. The reason that came about too, I can say, is that when it was Matthew's 1-year anniversary, no one in my family called me to recognize it.
Wow.
No one.
Wow.
And that was crushing. It was crushing.
You mentioned Matthew and his brother. Do you have any other children?
Yep, I have 2 daughters.
Okay.
They're actually, I don't ever consider them to be half sisters, but they're half sisters.
Okay. And did your daughters or your other son call you on Matthew's birthday?
They don't call me, no.
Okay.
They recognize it on Facebook, but they don't deal with me directly.
So everybody kind of has dealt with their grief in different ways.
Yeah, I don't hear from them on his birthday. I don't hear from him on the anniversary of his death. I think my theory is that it was so painful for them.
Sure.
And I am in such a painful spot too, that it's too hard to interact with me around those days.
Would you say the relationships have changed in the family, in the immediate family with your daughters and son?
They did it first.
Mhm.
They did it first.
Oh, okay.
I gave them permission to let me know if I was too much for them.
Good for you.
Basically, they gave me feedback that I was. So I felt very lonely, very unsupported, very disconnected. So it was pretty painful.
I bet. And it sounds like you went to counseling during that time. It sounds like you mentioned that you sought out support.
Yeah, the groups were very, very helpful. I actually met a woman in the one group whose son got killed on his bicycle on the West Coast, hit from behind when he was 25 years old.
Wow.
And her son's name was Matthew.
Oh, I guess.
And that felt like it was a gift from God, honestly.
So now we're 3 years out, and it sounds like at this point you'd like to receive some services, because it sounds like there's, I don't know, tell me if I'm hearing this correctly, there's still, of course, a tremendous amount of grief and loss, and you're trying to make sense of what is your new normal.
Yeah, I think that's where I am more than anything else. I haven't found anything to do that makes me feel like it's in honor of Matthew and it's fulfilling enough to fill a little bit of that hole. Matthew's 2 children moved rather quickly down to Florida, and his wife hasn't been all of that welcoming for me to support her and the kids. She views it as me trying to control raising Matthew's children.
So there was a lot of change that happened.
Yeah, that was a big loss too. I tried to make that happen, and probably about a year after Matthew died, she threatened to take the kids away from me, which I understand is pretty normal when there's young children. But there's not that much of me left anymore, or resilience.
What do you mean? Can you explain that a little bit more?
I used to be able to weather a lot more than I can now.
Okay.
When something happens that's emotional, it takes less now to put me over the edge, some edge that's invisible. But when I can feel myself going over it.
And so how can we as a bereavement center best support you at this time? When you think about what you need, are you able to identify what that is at this time?
I almost don't know what I need right now. I keep trying to figure it out.
Okay.
When Matthew first died, I needed to be in the woods. I needed to go for walks. I needed to go to that bereavement support group with other parents. My life has ramped up so that I feel like I fill in the time now with not those, but other things. I picked up a part-time job. My daughter just moved to California, so I helped her move. Like, there's busier things in my life, and it's gotten faster, and so I don't find myself taking the time I used to take to grieve or think of Matthew. And I noticed that now, as of late, I'm having a really hard time sleeping more than like 5 or 6 hours at a time. Even with, I took sleeping pills I
Sorry.
took, that's okay.
Mhm.
I took sleeping pills on and off a little bit, portions
Mhm.
of them. But those don't even seem to, like, I never took them all the time.
Mhm.
The other thing I have a hard
So
time,
is this new, the sleeping, or has this been kind of constant?
it's kind of constant. It comes and goes.
Okay.
Sometimes I sleep so soundly, I sleep 10 hours at a block, and sometimes it's 5 hours. And sometimes I wake up at 3:30. I'm awake till 4:30, go back to sleep.
Mhm. Are there,
Sleep's a challenge.
and you started to mention something else. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
I find because I came from a recovery background, I have been in a CODA group on and off for over 20 years.
Mhm.
The
What is CODA?
bereavement group,
I'm sorry, what is
oh,
CODA?
Codependence Anonymous.
Okay, thank you.
Um, so I was in some really unhealthy relationships in my past,
Mhm.
and the CODA meetings really helped. And honestly, before Matthew got hit, I thought I could weather
Mm.
anything in my life.
Sure.
I had figured out skill sets, I had figured out
Mhm.
boundaries, I'd figured out all of the healthy things to
Mhm.
do to get
Yeah,
yourself into a safe space.
yeah.
In Matthew's death, there's no safe,
Mhm.
oops,
That.
there's no safe space anymore.
Can you describe that just so I understand it a little bit better? Is a safe space, are you talking about an emotional safe space?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, emotional. There's not a space anymore where there's a guarantee that my other children won't die.
Oh, sure.
There's not a space anymore. There's no guarantees.
Right. So really learning to, how do you live with something that happened so suddenly and was out of your control?
Right,
Mhm.
right.
That
And
makes
where
a
do
lot
you
of
put that loss? Where do
Mhm.
you put that person
Mhm.
that you gave birth to
Mhm.
on June 14th, 1978 at 8 pounds?
Yeah.
And also Matthew and I were really super close.
Mhm.
He called me like 3 or 4 times a week.
Mhm.
He thought very much the same way. We both loved adventuring. When I went out there, we would do bike riding, hiking.
Mhm.
I guess we looked, out of all of my children, Matthew and I saw life's situations from the same perspective.
Yeah. So there's a lot of similarities and
Yes,
yeah.
yes, a lot of similarities. So I um, struggle now with how to make life normal with my other children.
Mhm. Sure. And is that one of the things that you would also like to focus on? Besides finding your own normal, how do you live with this grief? Also, how do you begin to, you know, now how do you connect with your kids when this tragedy has happened?
And I connect with them, but I have to tuck Matthew away.
Mm-hmm. You mean you have to tuck the emotions away about? What do you mean by tuck them away?
Um,
Discussions about him
yeah, make like he never even
existed.
existed.
And that must be incredibly,
It's
incredibly
really
painful.
painful, really painful.
Sure.
Um, I think the biggest gift that you could give a parent, although everybody's different, I've learned from being part of Compassionate Friends
Mm-hmm.
that all of us parents are so different with what we need. Like one person doesn't gets angry because somebody asks them how they're doing. Somebody else gets angry because they mention their child's name. Another person gets angry because they weren't asked and the child wasn't mentioned. Like there's a gambit,
So everybody's so different, right?
completely different.
Yeah.
as to what's acceptable and not acceptable for them. So I
Yeah.
guess if I had one thing to say is when people ask me if it's okay or not okay to talk about
Mm-hmm.
whatever they feel they need to say to
Mm-hmm.
me. But I think along with the loss of Matthew, I lost a relationship with my 3 other children.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that tragedy had probably such a well, of course it had a profound effect on everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
It sounds like I wonder if everybody's trying to find that new normal.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I wait until somebody mentions, because every once in a while they will mention him. But the most information really I get, especially from my 2 girls, not from my son, but from my 2 girls, is through Facebook, how they reflect on his birthday or how they reflect on the day he was hit.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
So,
Well, this is, I can feel how painful this is for you, and navigating in 3 years probably feels like it went by in a second.
yeah.
And the grief is real, and grief has, as you know, its own path.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's never going to leave.
Right.
It's never going to leave. It's helpful to talk to some of the people like compassionate friends that their children have died 10 years
Mm-hmm.
ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think they've been right up to maybe 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
They still cry at certain points, but they've found a new balance.
Yeah.
I haven't found that balance yet.
Yes. Well, this is very helpful, and I'm trying to figure out if I have any other questions. I think this really provides a wonderful overview, and I think that you are so articulate and know what you need. And kind of the next stages from here are that I meet with the social work counseling team to be, the best person to connect with you. Do you have any questions, or would you like to add anything else that I might not have asked?
I guess the other thing that I wanted to share was what worked for me in
Yeah.
recovery
Okay.
did not work in grief.
Oh, can you say a little bit more about that?
Nothing worked.
Okay.
In
All those
recovery,
tools, yeah.
yeah, in recovery, journaling helped. In grief, I didn't have enough energy to journal.
Yeah.
In recovery, just distancing myself, putting boundaries down. There is no boundaries
Mm-hmm.
with grief. The tools, the mechanisms that I had set in place to survive some of the other things that I've experienced in my life, none of them worked. So I guess that's the other piece to that. And the plan was, I talked to Matthew on August 1st, and our plan was when I turned 65, I was going to move out and live somewhere next to his brother and him.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have a plan for my next stage in my life. And that plan still hasn't materialized.
Are you near 65? Is that point?
Yes, I am. I'm at
All right.
65.
So you're probably more acutely aware as you approach that age. All right, what am I going to do now?
Right. And I don't have a clear plan. It feels like I finally had a plan because I've never had a plan with my life. And I had meaning, and that was taken away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's helpful.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to turn off the recording and wrap up with some other logistical issues.
Okay.